It's Danielle Smith, leader of the Wildrose Alliance Party. How are you doing, Danielle?
Doing well.
Okay, so big conference this weekend
Yes.
from the Manning Center, talking about Alberta's future.
Yes.
Of course, you probably have a very strong opinion on Alberta's future. That's why you're here. And in fact, you showed up for the whole conference, which I don't think many people expected.
Oh, really?
No, well, you know, you've got lots of stuff to do and a lot of people to meet, a lot of babies to kiss and hands to shake.
We're talking about policy. That's my favorite thing to do.
Well, you know, I think a lot of politicians are more about politics than policy.
Maybe.
So, let's talk about perhaps the big take-home message
Yeah.
for you that you've been able to learn this weekend. What has that been?
Well, there's been big take-home messages from every single session that we were in. I think the message that I was trying to get across is that I think democracy is in a sorry state in Alberta, or it has been, and I think apathy has set in because we have a government that's been in power for 38 years, and there was never really anyone on the political scene in Alberta who was able to challenge that long-term government until the Wildrose Alliance. I mean, we've been around for 2 years now, and I think we're able to bring a different dynamic to the discussion. I think as a new Conservative party is actually creating a really interesting dialogue and discussion, and I'm glad to see that. I'm glad people are interested in policy discussions again. I think it will give Albertans a lot of choices in the next provincial election.
Now, a lot of people in the media, including I guess myself to a certain degree, were sort of framing last night, at least when you were on the panel discussion, to be sort of a bit of a battle royale between Wildrose and PC, sort of a rare time when you actually see a forum for the discussion of those ideas. Do you think that the conflict is overhyped, or do you? I saw an eyebrow raised there. So, do you think that these discussions ought to happen more, and do you think that the government is shying away from perhaps debating these things?
Well, I think that MLA Kyle Fawcett did a great job last night. I think that the crowd was able to see that he and I, at least, have a great many things in common. We had a lot of areas of agreement. And then, of course, he was stuck having to defend some of the worst decisions of his own government. And that's just the nature of politics when you're involved in a governing party. But I think that this is the problem that we have, is that there are a very small number of MLAs, and Kyle is one of them, who believe the same things that the Wildrose Alliance does, that we believe in the Conservative values that made this province strong. We believe in free enterprise. We believe in individual responsibility. We don't believe that government is the first resort. It should be the last resort. And he and I were talking very much along the same lines, especially since we both came up with the next chapter in Alberta's Future being one about self-reliance. That's what he called it. I called it a phase where I think Alberta needs to become a grown-up. I think that we've had a great 105-year history, but there are certain things that we need to do to assert ourselves and become a leader on the national stage and a leader on the international stage. But I thought it was really interesting that both Kyle and myself came to that same conclusion. And I think that this is the big debate that we're having in the province right now, is what does it actually mean to be Conservative? Is the governing party actually Conservative anymore? And I came to the conclusion that it wasn't. I came to the conclusion that the PC party has stepped away from the values that Albertans hold dear, and now it's time to create a new alternative that can get us back to the leadership role that we enjoyed for so many years.
Okay, you recently had, I think within the last month or month and a half, a couple of PC MLAs join your caucus.
Right.
Can you give us sort of any hint or indication that there might be more that are lining up that might be coming over soon?
I'm not expecting any other MLAs. I think that we're in a position now where we've got a caucus of 4 if you include me, 3 elected MLAs, and I think we're going to be able to pack a big punch in the upcoming legislative session. We'll be able to go from having one question a week to having one question a day, and I think we'll be able to bring forward some interesting issues for Albertans to consider. I think that we bring a slightly different perspective than the 2 traditional opposition parties, and while the Liberals and the NDs have done a fine job holding the government to account on the issues that their constituents are concerned about, I think that the Wildrose Party is going to be able to bring forward issues from a different perspective, a Conservative perspective, and hopefully, if we do our job right, push the government in the right direction so that we can all get better policy and better government. If we can do that, I think we'll have done our job.
Let's talk about that. Is the purpose of Wildrose to push the PC party back to the right, or is it to form government, or would you take off the table any sort of cooperative, I guess you could say, sort of merger of parties and ideas in the future?
A little early to talk about a united alternative.
Right, right.
I would say that both of those would be a scenario of success for us. If we were able to convince this party to move in the right direction, we were driving off a cliff, let's face it. And if we have been able to turn things around and get this province back on track, I think that all Albertans will be grateful for that. I don't think that the kind of leadership we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years have been up to the standards of what Alberta taxpayers expect. And if we can succeed in changing the direction of the government, I think that that's going to be very positive for all of us. And I think that's the role of an opposition if it wants to be effective. That being said, if they don't steer back on the right track, then we're going to be ready in the next election to be able to launch a full slate of candidates that's capable of forming government. That's the mandate I received from my members, is that they wanted us to be able to create a center-right alternative, a big tent alternative that is capable of launching a real challenge when the next election is held.
Okay, so on right track, wrong track, the next big test of that, of course, will be when the budget is delivered
right.
And I think you would agree that Ted Morton is a fairly conservative fellow.
Yep.
And I think you might agree that the appointment of Ted Morton as finance minister was a good step in a conservative direction for this government. What are your metrics, or what is your what are your standards for the budget? What would you say that it has to accomplish in order for it to be a success, and where will it fall short? If it's a failure, where will it fall short?
Well, it will be a failure because Minister Morton is not presenting his own budget. Keep in mind, he was only appointed to that position a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So he's presenting a budget that was put together by his predecessor, Minister Evans, and the Treasury Board President, Minister Snellgrove. So I don't think that you're going to see a budget that is a Ted Morton style budget. I think Minister Morton has already said on the record he agrees with 90% of Wildrose policy, so we'll have to wait to judge his performance based on next year's budget. But we're hearing some disappointing things already because we just had a throne speech this week and they're talking about 3 years of deficits. They seem to be talking about going back into debt. They're calling it something fancy. They're calling it the issuance of Alberta capital bonds, but what it is debt, is another fancy way of getting Albertans warmed up to the idea of plunging back into the red. And they've also acknowledged that they've screwed up the healthcare system, but how they're going to deal with that is to create yet another advisory board, yet another panel to do yet more consultation. I think that this is the problem that we see with the government, is that they've messed up a bunch of things, and I don't know that Albertans have the view that this is going to be the party that's going to lead us out of it. This is why we're offering an alternative. I mean, we didn't create this mess. We're just here to try to fix it, and hopefully, if we can do our job right over the next 2 years, earn the trust of Albertans, we'll get that opportunity.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. And well, thanks for coming to the conference, and good luck in the future.
Thanks for talking with me.
Okay.